You're unmuted.
The City of Plymouth Joint City Council Planning Commission special meeting for Wednesday, January 4th, 2023 is now called to order. Coronavirus advisory pursuant to Assembly Bill AB 361. The meeting is being held in person and via teleconference electronically. Members of the public participating electronically via this link and wishing to speak may do so during public comment by using the raised hand feature in the Zoom webinar, or on your phone use *9 to raise and lower your hand, or use *6 to mute and unmute your phone. You can submit a written public comment prior to meetings by emailing your comments to Deputy City Clerk at the email listed on the agenda before 5 p.m. on the day of meetings. Emailed public comments will be distributed to the City Council and made part of the official minutes. This meeting will be recorded. Council chambers are wheelchair accessible. Other special accommodations may be requested by contacting the City Clerk 72 hours in advance of the meeting. And I just want to remind everybody to please silence cell phones or similar devices. Could we please have a roll call?
I'm going to call council members first. Councilmember White.
Here.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Happy New Year, I'm here.
Councilmember Kleinfelter.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sim.
Here.
Mayor Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioners. Commissioner Moreno.
Here.
Commissioner Cozart. Vice Chair Sullivan
Here.
and Chair Clark.
Here.
Thank you.
And could we please rise for the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invocation, there are none. Item 2, approval of the Joint City Council Planning Commission special meeting agenda of January 4th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. Will you please have roll call vote?
Councilmember White.
Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelter.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Sim.
Aye.
Mayor Ackerman.
Aye.
Commissioner Moreno.
Aye.
Commissioner Cozart. Vice Chair Sullivan.
Aye.
Chair Clark.
Aye.
Thank you.
Number 3, public comment. At a special meeting, citizens wishing to address the City Council may do so at the time the matter on the agenda is discussed and public comment is open. Under provisions of the California Government Code, the City Council and Planning Commission is prohibited from discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda unless it can be demonstrated to be of an emergency nature or an urgent need to take immediate action arose after the posting of the agenda. And we encourage you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. And item number 4. Regular item.
You have a public comment card.
It's not related to the
Okay,
agenda item.
but you opened up public comment and you didn't let them.
Ask if they want to speak.
Yeah.
Anybody in the room?
At a special meeting, it's for items only on the agenda.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
So we can.
That's what I thought. That's why I was surprised it was even on. That's Frank. You're right.
We did. So speak.
Okay.
Okay, the regular item agenda, item 4.1, discussion and review of the 6th cycle draft housing element before draft submission to HCD. May we please have a staff report?
Madam Mayor, members of the council and planning commission, thank you for being here, and I hope I can present this as well as Aaron did at the previous meeting. I will give it my best. I'm not a planning expert by any stretch of the imagination. So we are in the countywide 6th cycle of the housing element. And it's for advancing.
Did we have more of these printed of the PowerPoint for the public in case we
We
can't?
do, there are copies
Okay.
on the table for members of the public.
We go through it on paper. Can do that.
We can go through it on paper,
Although folks on
although folks at
Zoom.
Yeah, there's more on the table there.
Right.
Switching to Zoom maybe. And not to-
Probably need some light now.
now, the right slide is like, oh, do you have it on your laptop that you put it on Zoom?
Only for the people on Zoom, yeah. So
Okay.
it won't be up here.
click the next.
It's not.
If it's an internet thing or not.
That's not with you. So I'm gonna move ahead.
Should we just turn lights up?
Yeah. So on page 2 of your slide presentation, this slide shows the outline for the timeline for the housing element and the work that has been done so far. The county has been acting as the lead agency, and there's been grant funds paid for much of the cost of the housing element. And County state that did a joint housing element. HCD was very pleased with our housing element during the 5th cycle, which makes common sense for us to do it again. There are many other counties this cycle doing joint elements. So that's a good thing. Once this meeting is over, we'll forward all of our comments and concerns to the consultant, and the consultant will incorporate those comments into the housing element. And then once all of the other cities' comments out, the draft housing element will be forwarded to HCD, which will begin the 90-day review process. During that 90-day review process, there'll be some back and forth between the jurisdictions and, well, most likely the consultant, which will get back to the jurisdictions and HCD to make sure that state laws are being met, program requirements are being met, and that the jurisdictions are in line with what they're proposing. Going ahead to page 4 is the blueprint. This is the blueprint for the general plan and how the cities will grow for approximately the next 20 years. The housing element is part of the general plan. And the housing element is the only element that has to be certified by HCD. And it has to be updated every 8 years. It lays out the housing policies and identifies goals and programs. And it has 12 cycles, and this is the 6th cycle. Page 5. This is the main component for the housing element. It's the goals, the policies, and housing programs. And we have to make sure that there are adequate land to meet the housing needs. We have to have programs to facilitate affordable and market rate housing, to mitigate government constraints, and to continue with the fair housing opportunities in our community. Page 6. This is the background report. And this is where we review all the information that the city has. What kind of housing do we have now? What's the population? What's the income of the population? What type of housing do we have? What is the biggest housing need? And we evaluate the previous housing element, which was 2014 to 2019. On page 7 is where each agency has an annex, which lays out where each jurisdiction has sites for housing. Additional programs and policies, and what is the cost to develop the land and what constraints are there? Skip ahead to page 10. As you can see on the graph, Plymouth's population has stayed pretty much the same with just slight growth since 1991 with 425 households. Slide. Yeah. This slide shows the housing stock comparison. And as you can see, Plymouth has the lowest single-family homes in the county. Slide. This has more information on housing. It shows jobs to households. And as you can see, Plymouth is higher than any other jurisdiction by quite a bit. In the previous meeting that we had when Aaron was presenting, this was brought to the forefront, and Aaron was going to follow up on this with a consultant. And when we get to the questions section, she may have an answer as to why ours is so much higher than the rest of the county, because that doesn't make sense. Slide.
You're talking about the household medium income?
No, the jobs to household,
Okay, ratio.
which shows 12 point something percent.
Do we hold off on our questions for a minute? Because I do have a question about that.
Okay,
Could that be considered under the fact of couples working in this area and saying 2 people working in one household? Because it's what, at 1.52 is what it said it was for jobs per household. So I'm wondering, do we have more couples that are working? Is that why that average is higher, or?
but where are they working? There's not a tremendous amount of jobs in Plymouth.
Of course not.
So our question in the previous workshop was, where are they working that it gets to that high number?
Well, that's pretty much not in the county, I can tell you that much. I mean, that's.
That was our question, is how did we get to such a high number?
It could, maybe a clarification could be, how do you define?
Yeah, how do you define, yeah.
So that may be a good question to answer. What is that definition of that statement?
And also, Plymouth has a lot of people of working age and people who work, and a lot of the county has just a lot of retirees as well. And that can factor into that.
Yeah, that's a huge statement there.
Is it jobs per household or jobs in Plymouth per household?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Did the consultant ever answer that question?
Sorry, now. It's out of hand.
I don't know. Erin will have the answer and she's gonna be on at the end of it. She's on. And she'll be on to answer questions at the end of the slideshow. It will be a little bit patient for that. Affordable ownership on page 13. There's a slight increase in this for Plymouth. To afford a house just over 400,000 for Plymouth, a family needs to make, or a household needs to make just over 81,000 per year to be able to qualify for a loan for that house cost.
That's about 20% higher than the median household income.
Correct. This slide shows rental rates, and Plymouth has some of the highest rental rates in the county. HCD is responsible for making sure each jurisdiction is taking on their fair share of housing. This is called Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. And they predict how much the state will grow, and then they break it down by region, by county, and then by city. Amador County is broken down by income level here, by very low, low income, moderate income, and above moderate. And another part of the housing element is inventory sites that could possibly be approved for each jurisdiction to accommodate their fair share of housing. Plymouth was given 30 new housing units. This go around for RHNA. Last cycle we had 8. So it's quite a jump for us for this cycle, but every agency in the county had a jump for this cycle. I think they're expecting California to grow by leaps and bounds. We do have a shortfall. We have moderate and above moderate, but we don't have any low or very low income. And the way the state determines that whether a site is available is its size, which is typically 15 units per acre for low and very low income. This map is our current zoning map, and it shows pending and approved projects and opportunity slash opportunity sites zones, which has Greelidge, which is pending, and Zinfandel, which is approved. And this is a larger map. And this is, the council may want to take a look at the 2 arrows on the map. This is something that you may want to look into changing. These locations may not be where you want to have housing go in, or zoning that you want to change into housing. These were not necessarily the areas that our planning people would have chosen for locations for housing. And just as a reminder, the city's not responsible for constructing the housing, only facilitating and accommodating within the community. There may be better sites in the community for housing. Yes,
There was in the bigger map, there was like a larger kind of square. And then on the smaller map, that same square.
Mhm.
The legend says that would be the city boundary, or is that a different? I'm not sure what the square was. We just go back.
I'm gonna go forward.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah, it looks like.
Because the city boundary is bigger than that square, so I'm not sure. What
Yeah, so I'm seeing the city boundary looks black. This is dark blue. There's
Do we know who chose these two locations?
the consultant
Consultant,
chose those
yeah.
locations.
Because the one on top is kind of odd. It's commercial.
It's very odd.
It's very odd. The one down below is in the chicken flat area, makes some sense. The one up here, but as you mentioned, this can be changed at some point.
Yes,
Obviously,
we would want to make that
Yeah.
recommendation
Yeah, of course.
going forward. And no, I don't know what that square is, but if you ask Aaron will know.
Okay.
So I'm not going to take a lot of time with these next few slides that have the programs on them. But I will highlight a few. Program 2, each year the city has to do a report to the state, and the city is currently up to date with its reporting. So I will make sure we stay on top of that reporting moving forward until we get somebody on board in planning. Program 3, the city has to rezone at least 2 acres, including 1 acre with the highest resource area. Program 4,
Excuse me. Do you know what is meant by the highest resource area?
I believe it's the 15 to accommodate the low and very low. Program 4 is encourage construction. And then if you skip to page 24, program 11, provide multifamily homes versus single family homes. At some point, we're going to need to update our zoning codes to catch up with state law. And we'll go to slide page 26 for program 19 is the water. There should be a huge asterisk right there, as water is a huge topic in Amador County. And so, again, where do we go from here? Comments and questions for the consultant. It'll go to HCD for the 90-day review. It'll come back. Our planning commission will do a review, make recommendations to the city council, and the city council will review and adopt a housing element. So at this point, Erin, I saw her, can answer questions. Shoot, I'm so sorry. Can answer questions for the council and the planning commission. Then you can take public comment, or you can take public comment and then do the questions and comments at the whatever the mayor's pleasure.
Okay, and thank you for the reports. Why don't we go ahead and open this to the public for questions, comments, that sort of thing. And a reminder to, we encourage you to keep your comments to within 3 minutes. So public comments or questions? Anybody here at City Hall?
Good evening, everyone.
Mike,
Mike,
You're talking to Mike.
I was. Quick, now I have.
Yeah, we go through this process every 8 years, and I'm not sure that we work with it in 8 years to go around the clock, but anyway. What strikes me with this is, the need for, and it keeps saying fair housing element. And it's got to be, fair to everyone. And it's not only fair to one element of society, but fair to the residents you have your current employment. What my concern is not so much with the limited amount they have here, but in the future projects that we have, that they're doing fiscal analysis to see the impact of these projects on the current residents, and that we are to the point where I think you've all heard me talk about the elderly population that we have, and I did say sometime back, and it's actually 18% of our population was single women and widows, and those people, a lot of them are on fixed income, most of them are on fixed income, some of them are under $1,000 a month. So if we impact them with more costs in providing services on a fair basis to one part of the group, we can't forget about them. And it has to be, fair at all. And we need to do a fiscal analysis on all these projects. The greatest project is coming up, the portion of the RV park that's part of that proposed development is it has some serious flaws financially because they're talking now about making a lot of the permanent facilities where you wouldn't even get the DOT tax on them. And so this things need to be steady, and we need to be fair to everyone, not just one part of society, but the people who live here. And we need to do a fiscal analysis to see where we're going with this. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike?
Right here.
Anybody else here in City Hall that has questions, comments? Okay. How about Dana on Zoom? Do we have anybody with their hand raised?
Not at this time.
Okay, and we did receive some written comments. So that will be entered.
Related to it. our
Yeah.
topic.
So that'll be entered into the minutes. And so at this time, I'll close public comments and ask for some council discussion, questions. Excuse me, council and planning commission. I apologize.
I have questions whenever you're ready. Yeah.
Could we just summarize the written comments?
That's good. How
The
many
written
other,
comments have been submitted.
Oh.
This isn't the first time
you don't read them?
that they've been submitted, and they relate to a traffic study that was done that also affects and is related to housing element. So I think those comments are valid and should go in as part of the city's comments.
Shall we read them into the record?
Would you, I'm happy to read it, but unfortunately I didn't bring a copy.
Maria has some extras there. Commissioner Moreno has her hand raised, just when you. Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry, did you call on me?
Not yet.
Not yet, I'm gonna read
Okay,
it.
I can't hear everything that's being said, so.
Okay, I'll try to talk louder. I'm gonna read an email that was sent in. This is from Plymouth Empire Properties. Plymouth City Council and Planning Commission, Plymouth Empire Properties Incorporated, PEP, was asked by the city manager / planner in 2017 if we were willing to have any of our land designated as HD, high density, and IND, industrial. April 20th, 2017, James Beggs, city planner, planning commission, public meeting, 7 sites were considered for high density zoning, including 11.427 acres of our APN number, and there's an APN number here. On 5/10/2018, the city council approved the traffic study for industrial and regional housing needs assessment, which was awarded to TJKM on 8/24/2018. The draft traffic impact study report was completed on April 9th. I think this is supposed to be 2019. And some pages are attached. The city changed staff in 2019 with a new city manager and planner, Aaron Ventura. My first conversation with the planner was on 8/22/2019. She was not aware of the study. I provided information and was told the draft report is being reviewed by the staff. Once the review is complete, it will be presented to the planning commission and the public. There were repeated requests, verbal and written, submitted for the status directly to city staff at council and commission meetings. At one point, Aaron advised that this was on the back burner due to staff changes. This has gone on every year since 2019 when the draft was received by the city. My written submission under public comment was not included on the minutes, so I questioned the minutes as prepared. The planner read my emails into the record, available on audio, and the minutes reflect only that, not the content. One of the planning commissioners repeatedly requested that this be agendized, which it was not. Now we are looking at 2 street addresses, not even APNs being considered for the high density. When were these parcels selected? At what meeting? Why was there no public input? Given the circumstances, I am opposed to the Plymouth portion of the county-wide housing element. Respectfully submitted, Carol Lynn Emerson.
Not sure that's relevant to exactly what we're here for. High density versus housing element.
It is part of it.
Is it
That's
part of it? I mean,
the Plymouth Empire Properties. There's, I think, 13 parcels or so. Stephanie probably knows better than I do. They were selected, I think, by James Begg, previous planner, or Michael, whatever verb it is. Baker. And I had met with him about planning issues. And he said that 2 of the parcels had been selected that would be identified as potentially high density. To my mind, it has that change or that designation. I think Carol is correct that it had not gone to a planning commission and had not gone to a council. So it's just colors on a map, and it needs to be at some point addressed properly. It's their property. They should have input. And if I'm remembering wrong, someone will correct me.
Stephanie Moreno, one of our planning commissioners, has been waiting patiently with her hand up. So can we hear from Stephanie?
No, I was just raising my hand to indicate that I had questions. If you're not ready for me yet, that's fine.
No, I think we're ready for comments and questions and discussion from the council and the planning commission.
Okay. So I have a number of questions. They mostly have to do with process. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Okay, thank you. When we received the notice of the agenda meeting, the email that came with it indicated that the city manager would be presenting and that she would not have answers to the questions at the meeting, but would attempt to get them for us as soon as possible after the meeting. So I'm assuming is that changed, that now the questions are going to be answered during the meeting because Aaron is at the meeting, or is there still a possibility that some questions will be pushed to a later date?
Stephanie, we're gonna make every effort to answer your questions tonight. Aaron, after the agenda went out and we had that put in the email, Aaron emailed and said she would attend via Zoom. So she's here to try to answer all of your questions.
Okay, thank you. So my next question is, again, regarding process. The public comment period is January 9th. Today's January 4th. I'm unaware if there is another planning commission or city council meeting scheduled, but how are the suggestions and comments that will be submitted by the public and or others before by January 9th be addressed by the city council so that they are there is some kind of consensus from the city rather than staff incorporating changes into the housing element after it's come to the city council?
Erin, are you able to answer that?
Yes, hi, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, hi, Erin.
Yeah, so as you know, the deadline for comments was extended an extra two weeks or so through the holiday. And so we are coming down to the end, and honestly, I don't think that there is an opportunity to bring those comments back. I've been through this when we had the meeting earlier or last month, and also been through this in another jurisdiction within the county. And I don't know what your comments are, what the council and commission's comments are going to be, but some of the comments I've received so far throughout the county are honestly things that HCD will not budge on. So that is something to consider. And in my professional opinion, and in working with Plymouth, I think that your biggest focus should be on identifying different sites for a higher density to meet those RHNA shortfalls. But I don't know that there was an opportunity to bring back comments for the council and planning commission to review them before it goes to the consultant to send to HCD.
Thank you.
Doug Sim. How many acres are we trying to identify for this for the purpose of this housing element?
So it's a
Two or three. Right.
city number, or it's a unit number, and they I'm sorry, I'm trying to do some of this off the top of my head. So and it's a minimum of 15 units per acre, and I think our shortfall was like 40 units. So 2.5 acres, about.
And I'm sorry, I want to, if you have more questions, if you can hold them. I do want to go back to Stephanie because I think that perhaps she had more questions. Is that right, Stephanie?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I want to say that I'm very gravely concerned about the response that I just received on incorporating comments from the council, planning commissioners, and members of the public into the draft housing element. It sounds to me like we're just trying to check off a box that we held a public hearing, rather than actually thoughtfully trying to make sure that this draft housing element meets the needs of the people that live, work, and own property here. So I just want to go on to record with that. I think that the city council, I'm hoping that you will disagree with that and that you will decide to hold another meeting to review those comments and make sure that anything of import is included in the draft housing element. My next question is, I wanted to know I know you expressed a concern with the rates on page 12 that were listed for Plymouth, but I'm wondering about the vacancy rate of 18.8%. I'm unaware of any vacancy rate for residential housing in Plymouth. How was that? How do you define a vacancy? I mean, does that include like second homes? Is that included in the vacancy rate?
So if that number came from the US Census Bureau. And that's typically where information for background reports from housing elements comes from. The city doesn't track that information. And I would assume those are houses that I don't know exactly what the definition of vacancy rate is for a housing element.
That really skews the look of the town, indicating that we have a lot of extra housing when we have no housing stock available for rent. So I am concerned that we didn't do due diligence on trying to confirm some of that. Whereas we're a small town, we could have done or could do a survey to try to determine that, just even using water and sewer bill information. So anyway, that's another comment. I think this question was already answered. The property owners, I'm understanding that the property owners at 9451 Pacific and 9621 Main were not consulted about a decision to rezone their properties. Is that what I heard earlier?
To my mind, that would be correct.
Thank you. I would say that that's another grave concern, that we're proposing to zone properties for people without having had a discussion with them about that. There's a new law, I think it just took effect a few days ago, that allows residential development on commercial properties. Was that taken into account in determining the available sites for residential development, so that it didn't require rezone?
If it just took effect this year, then probably not. I don't think that the consultants, I mean, I didn't hear anything about that in our meetings when they were preparing this.
Okay, thank you. Are there any proposed changes to municipal codes, zoning codes, or the general plan, or service fees, impact fees incorporated in this document that have not yet been reviewed and approved by the city council?
So in the programs and policies that are proposed in the draft housing element, there are updates to the general, or the zoning code. Most of those are all of them are ones that are required by state law. So for example, the accessory dwelling unit, it is not codified in our zoning code. Anyone who comes to the city now and says, I want to build a second house, an accessory dwelling unit on my property, City of Plymouth automatically defaults to the state requirements for that. So what the housing element is saying is there's a few things like that. I want to say emergency shelters, reasonable accommodations that are programs in the housing element that over this 8-year period, they want to see us updating our actual zoning code to have that information in there.
So let me rephrase that. Is there any discretionary changes to municipal code, planning code, general plan that are included in this housing plan that are not mandated by state law?
No.
Thank you. What about fees? Have the fees been changed from what they are now in anticipation that there's going to be new fee schedules adopted by the city?
Does the housing element change the fees for the city, the fee schedule?
No, I'm just saying our tables incorporated in the housing element regarding fees. You have estimate of how much a fee is going to be per house, or all of those are based on existing approved fees. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. On page 17 or page 25 of the annex, the program 17s, program 17, are those all already included? I'm trying to go back to the annex. Table 4P1 summarizes the residential unit potential from the above methods and provides a comparison with Plymouth's RHNA and inventory parcels as shown in figure Plymouth 1. So again, I'm assuming that's consistent with your previous answer, that those are all things that are already in place. The city has adopted. There's no proposals in that paragraph or matrix that the city has not yet considered.
I'm sorry, in program 17 about residential care facilities, employee housing, that.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so some of those are requirements of the state that all, that by right zoning for certain things like emergency shelters.
Okay, so that's the same answer as before. Thank you. I would like to suggest that that the city consider a program to waive or reduce zoning fees, boundary line adjustments, fees, and or lot split fees to increase the amount of vacant lots that are in the city. There are a number of parcels that are large lots with just one house on them that could accommodate additional housing. Was there any consideration given to any kind of program that would reduce the cost for a homeowner to do that in order to increase density?
No.
This is, can I have a question, follow up to that, Stephanie, this bill? Is that within the scope of this effort here to change fees? Just want to clarify. Okay, so a fee discussion is not what we can do.
So I think the housing element can provide accommodation or help to remove barriers to like streamline the development of housing and housing at a variety of income types. I don't know that that's the best method for Plymouth. The city runs on such a tight budget anyways, and so much of it is cost recovery that waiving fees for those types of for development is just going to add an additional burden on the city.
My recommendation in that is that I think the lost revenue from the various grants and opportunities, funding opportunities, SB1, et cetera, if we're not in compliance with housing, is probably greater than any lost fees relative to zoning or boundary line changes. So that was my thought in there. Thank you, Mayor. That is all the questions that I have at this time.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Any other council discussion, questions? Excuse me, council and planning commission? I apologize.
I have a couple questions.
Okay, Mike Sullivan?
Okay, hey, Aaron, on page 11 of the PowerPoint, you have the PowerPoint, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it lists a big chunk of mobile homes here. And I guess my question also leads over onto page 12 of kind of where this data is coming from. When I was reading the housing element in the main portion, the county portion outside of the annexes, it was referring to Plymouth, but referring to things that were just kind of in our zip code. So for example, it was talking about mobile home parks in Plymouth, and it was talking about Mariah Heights, which is almost the county line. Del Oro, which I don't think is in the city. I could be wrong on that. Right. That is not in the city. So I was curious if those numbers were incorporated in this number of, it looks like we just have a huge amount of mobile homes here, like 30% of our city is mobile home units. So I also was curious if maybe the transient mobile home slips at the 49er were included in this, because I can't see that based on our numbers that 30% of our housing stock is mobile homes. So I was just curious where that came from. And then that kind of bleeds into number 2, which I'll give you really quick here too. On the next page, when we talked about this a little earlier with that jobs to household ratio, curious where that data came from, if it was jobs in the city of Plymouth, because that would mean we had 673 jobs here. If my math is correct, which I don't think we do have. And then, or is that counting out of county employment like me who commutes down to Sacramento. So those are my two questions that are just both basically, where's the data coming from for these things out of curiosity?
Yeah, and so those are, some of it is coming from the census, some of it is coming from us, from the city. And unfortunately, I was not able to get a response over the last 3 weeks of constantly emailing the consultant to get some of these questions answered. Pretty disappointing because we've come down to kind of the wire here with this. So I can continue, or Margaret can continue to try to get the consultant to respond to answer these questions, because again, this jobs housing doesn't make sense. It's supposed to be divide the number of jobs by the number of housing units. So there's very few jobs in Plymouth.
Yeah, I think possibly they're considering the whole zip code like they are in earlier parts of the housing element, and that might be confusing it. I'm not sure. I didn't really run the numbers down other than some quick stuff, but that could be part of the problem. They're including all of 95669. So that'd be, Willow Creek and Burke Ranch and the other unincorporated areas around us included in here as well as the trailer park behind Mariah Heights and Del Oro and all that kind of stuff. So that would be my suggestion. If they're not sure where to look, they might want to see, are they confusing that data with data within the city limits?
So I'll pass that information along to the consultant to try to get some clarification and answers there.
Great, thanks. That's all I have.
Mike McLaughlin has his hand raised.
Mike McLaughlin from the City Council, you have comments?
Yes, Mayor, thank you very much. Just a couple of items, I think, just for clarification and bringing, I guess, some context with this housing element, in full circle that, Commissioner Moreno brought up some very good questions. And I think it's important, with our entire audience to note that whether it's increasing fees, decreasing fees, or changing it, all of those would be independent actions need to be taken up by the city council for anything to be improved, where, the housing element itself is an element of the countywide general plan, which is a general direction. In this particular housing element is if you will, a prescription to help us come in compliance with state law. And it's not asking us at this point to do anything over and above, but come into compliance with what HCD is asking us to do. I share the concern that we need to look at the individual parcels and certainly have conversations with property owners if we're even going to be talking about potentially increasing the density of certain parcels. In terms of the jobs per household, this is a metric that talks about employment versus unemployment, not where the jobs exist. So in this case, I think it was 1.52 jobs per household, which means for each household, 1.5 on average, 1.52 people are employed. It's not where they're employed, it's whether they're employed. So, a home with 2 retirees would be 0. A home with 2 people working would be, 2. It's not where the jobs are, it's that whether people are employed or unemployed. It's not a matter of where they're employed. That's not the metric of this. So it just kind of goes back to the painting the picture when you look at the low income, very low income, moderate income, and then the job ratio to it. And then you look at the mean median mode of income rates, that people are making in households. It's just another metric that ties some of that together. So hopefully that shed a cloud of shadow over the shadow. So thank you, Mayor.
And this Bill talked with another question. So just going back to the map, why was there a designated square? I'm just not sure what that represents.
I think if it's that map, on the full city map with the square in the middle, that just shows what the blown up map on the next slide is.
19 and 20, page 19 on the PowerPoint.
So it's just showing that it's enlarging that
on the
from the previous
so
map.
That's where to designate the properties that the consultant identified. Let's just say that makes sense. Thank you.
I want to correct one thing that Aaron suggested. This comment period was not extended. We have this comment period because it's required by state law, and I pointed that out to the city. and the city attorney. So, because it's important that the city of Plymouth be in compliance, whether the other cities or the county are or not. It's not their responsibility for our general plan. I am a little bit concerned about the general, the nature of the PowerPoint is pretty generic. And it doesn't really address Plymouth on the picture that we would like to have in our housing element for Plymouth. The housing element, when we adopt it, will be the housing law of the land for 8 years, which always turns into 10 years. So it's a very important process. Yes, we are woefully in need of affordable housing, like everyone else in Amador County. The governor felt, and the legislature felt when they approved legislation for accessory dwelling units, that would make a difference. And in small communities like ours, it hasn't really caught on and made that much of a difference. It could be the amount of investment that it takes for someone to build an accessory dwelling unit. So we could look at that. And we do need to think outside of the box in the next 8 years with public-private partnerships for affordable housing. If we buy land and a developer agrees to certain things, these are done all the time. We're not reinventing the wheel, but we need to be in compliance with state law. And it's not just to be in compliance. We need to do everything we can so people can afford to live here. It's terribly important. And that the people that already do live here aren't priced out. And that happens in communities all over Northern California as well. Their kids can't afford to live in the same town they grew up in. So if there's a lot of things that needed to be done, I would hope that when we get to the point of actually reviewing for adoption, that we see the full housing element and the new proposed housing element side by side instead of a PowerPoint presentation. So we can digest what is actually being changed, what the comments were, how the comments were incorporated into the proposed new housing element. So I'll probably have more in a minute, but I'm good.
I got, and I'm gonna try to keep this not squirrely and not go. Aaron, is there a definition between low income, affordable, and workforce housing? Or are they basically all considered the same thing?
Workforce housing, I don't know, but low income and, like very low, moderate, above moderate are all do have definitions and like price ranges, both for rental and for sale. And that is set by the state. And then each county is given, obviously what it is in Amador County is different than what an affordable house would be considered in Sacramento County.
Okay. So that's kind of one thing I wanted to go back. I have to agree strongly with Ms. Marino on the vacancy. That just doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't. There's no way.
They have to be counting Airbnb.
Yeah. Also, I heard former Councilmember Colburn talk about the retirees and the widows and that. I'm going to go on the other spectrum and kind of go off of what Valerie was saying. I have a 22-year-old and I have an 18-year-old. My 18-year-old is almost done with school. My 22-year-old is now in the workforce. And I don't know how they could even afford rent in this county anywhere. And my 22-year-old is making way more money I was making at 22. these numbers that I see, 1,800, 1,300 for rent, that's garbage. Everything's over $2,000, 2,500. I guess my biggest thing is when I use the term workforce housing, we got to think of that in the next 8 years. That has got to be, our number one goal. I know Amador County has always been kind of an area that retirees move to. I'm one of the few that can say I survived in Amador County and I was able to buy a house, which I still to this day just go, I was lucky. That's all I can say. I was lucky how I wound up. So we do have a lot of kids that, I don't know. I know a lot. I'm very fortunate. A lot of my friends I still see on a regular basis, but a lot of them also had to move away from here. They just couldn't afford to live here. And it wasn't by their choice.
I want to chime in on what Keith is saying, because it's terribly important that we look for housing that people can afford. We're a tourism, not just a tourism city, we're a tourism county, which means there's a huge amount of service workers. And how are they going to afford any of this housing stock?
Are you next?
Yes, please, go ahead.
We're a tourism county. I'm not sure about the tourism city. We have 50 full-time residents living in their trailers in the RV park. They're advertising for 15 to 20 more in a park that has around 300 slips. We're talking about 25% of that park is going towards full-time residents. Aaron, is that part of our equation here with our available housing, et cetera? Because it seems to be overlooked a little bit. Is that an RV park, or is that becoming a mobile park?
It always has.
With the consultants, with the numbers and the numbers they use, but it very well could be that those numbers are counted. So
You know, if the full-time residents are paying TOT monies. I know people come in for a day, a weekend, 3 days, 2 weeks, they're paying TOT, 10% of what they pay comes to the city. How about the full-time residents there? They're living there for years, 50 of them, are they paying TOT?
Any residents, 30 days is
I'm just
considered,
Aaron, sorry.
yeah, but 30 days is considered housing rather than a short-term rental.
So
they would be exempt from the TOT.
would that include the little brown houses out there as well? I didn't count those, I just at least 25 or 30 of those that are in that park as well. The little buildings, I mean, I presume they're paying TOT taxes.
Yes.
I don't know, there's been a lot of discussion about that park recently within the city. Things that may or may not be right, but I just don't, I'm not clear what the definition of that park is. I always thought an RV park was a place you bring an RV in, you spend a few days, a week, whatever, and you leave. Not full-time people, and it looks to me like it's increasing as time goes on.
Well, perhaps
That may
that
be
should
for
be
the
on a
day.
future agenda.
Yes, well, it appears this agenda's been spread out a little bit though, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. But go ahead.
I had another comment regarding, it got brushed over a little bit about infrastructure. And our capacity for infrastructure, and I think John Coburn was alluding to infrastructure when he mentioned people that live here shouldn't be paying for new housing stock. The cost of infrastructure for those. So it's important that we be clear in the housing element that how much capacity we have. And if we build out to a certain level, what that would mean in needs to the community. And it's expensive. Our sewer plant most of our water and sewer bills are sewer, and it's debt service, it's non-negotiable. So the RV park, if you want to talk about RV, each slip is considered a dwelling unit that counts against our sewer capacity. So the details, the devil is in the details. So it's, and our water capacity, Amador Water Agency is doing a little bit of getting squirmy about will serve letters at this point, which is by right. You know, if you can't promise to deliver water, don't say you will. So we have to, somewhere in the housing element, I hope we have a comment or a phrase addressing infrastructure.
I wasn't clear what you said about new housing not paying their fair share of the infrastructure. Is that what you said? Maybe I misunderstood you. Because
What sometimes happens, and I'm not saying, what sometimes happens is communities don't charge the developer and the developer fees, or don't address capacity when a development is going in. So then they're faced with, if the developer doesn't pay for your capacity issues, everyone in town does.
as I understand it, the water and the sewer hookup on a new home exceeds $60,000 per house. That would suggest to me they're paying quite a bit of money towards the
Those are
sewer
app-
plant and things of that nature.
Those are apples and oranges. Capacity is how much do we have left and how much can we build? Because this plan says, oh, we need to build this many houses, but it's a piece of paper, and can we?
Have a comment or a thought. Councilmember Sem, I do think we have to really understand if the RV park residents are included. Like that's a must for us to make a sound policy decision, right? Because if they are, that's 30 to 50 units that should be considered low, very low.
It's not 30 or 50, it's 50 to 70.
To meet the requirement here, right? So I think that's one, we really have to know that answer. Are they included? And if they're not, that may shape future policy decisions around RV park or other opportunities. And then the second, I just want to confirm, so to be in compliance with the housing element, what we really have to do is decide on the rezonings of at least 2 acres. Like that's what our core concern is here.
To be compliant.
2+. Somewhere in the city limits of Plymouth. Would that be accurate?
Yes, so like I said before, the big concern for the city of Plymouth is identifying sites that can accommodate your arena. So for example, in the other cities within the county, they either have pending projects that will accommodate the arena or have vacant sites that can accommodate those numbers. So the city does not. And we have some carryover from last time. And so that is what the biggest concern is showing where these sites are and rezoning them and to do that. So per the traffic study and Plymouth Empire Properties before, that was the beginning of that from last cycle, and it never got fully implemented. And in talking with that property owner over the last few years, the plan was to include those properties since they had shown interest in this round of housing element update, and that wasn't done. And so it is my suggestion, it had been my suggestion to the consultant to change those, and they said we can't change the properties right now, we need to go out with the draft. So
Just to clarify, our decision would be, do we stick with what the consultant indicated with the 2+ acres, or do we change that to a new designated spot, of which may be the Empire built owner?
Right.
Or another parcel?
mhm.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of time. The original deadline for comments was December 14th. It was extended to the 9th. The first, I think it was like November 11th to December 14th. The county and other jurisdictions held meetings, public meetings similar to the ones you've been that happened a few weeks ago, and then this one. The consultant was willing to extend it to the 9th, but they need to move on with this. We are already late, as everyone knows. And you know, I guess a downside of a joint housing element is that if one city continues to hold it up, you're just keeping everyone out of compliance with not having a housing element that is been certified. So.
Stephanie has her hand up. Stephanie, you have comments, questions? Your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a question based on what somebody just said, or some of the comments that were made. Why can't the very low and the low housing be incorporated into the Greeley Ranch subdivision? That project hasn't been approved. It's going to be coming in front of the city. Why does that subdivision have to be above moderate housing if we don't have enough low housing? Why are we forcing other landowners to rezone their property that had no intentions of developing instead of using an existing pending application to accomplish those goals?
So I mean, the applicant of Greeley Ranch has not indicated that they are doing anything besides market rate housing. That is something that the city in its approval process could require them to do, is to provide affordable housing or have a section that's higher density.
Stephanie, any more questions or comments?
Yeah, I thought that every new development had to accommodate for affordable housing, either through actual lots or through mitigations. So I'm confused by Aaron's answer.
They're not asking for, Greeley Ranch isn't asking for any concessions or anything like that. So typically that is how you get affordable housing in developments, is they're asking for concessions on other things.
That's not my understanding of the law. My understanding of the law is that there is every project that gets approved has to address affordable housing, whether they're asking for concessions or not. Usually the concessions are granted in return for that. I don't know. Councilmember Kleinfelter might be more familiar with that as well.
As far as I know, the state law, because affordable housing is terribly important in California, does require new development to either address affordable housing within their development or to contribute to off-site affordable housing. And that's the way it should be. And we should hold people's feet to the fire.
And so I think this is getting off topic for what needs to happen here. You have a very short period of time to organize the comments to get them back to the consultant. And I understand there's some questions in the background information and data, and we can do our best to get some of those clarified. But really what needs to be looked at is those sites and then the programs that are in the housing element, because that's what the city will be held to over the next 8 years to be able, they'll be required to show HCD what kind of progress they've made in fulfilling those programs.
So do we need to just address, do we accept the two parcels, or do we would select alternate parcels basically? And what are the alternate parcels that we have available to do? I think that's where we start.
I think that's a good comment, Bill, because I'm quite concerned about a consultant deciding for the city what should be identified as the sites for affordable housing without regard for the property owners or the council or the planning commission.
Aaron, are we stuck with those two sites in this format?
No, and that's what I'm trying to say.
We can change that.
Change that. And that was my intention. When I told them, I said, no, those aren't the ones we would, that's not. It was like, it's too late, sorry. So my suggestion would have, to the consultants would have been to look at the sites of the ones that had the traffic study done before, since that was a property owner that was at one point interested in a higher density zoning for their property. And the city was interested in that also. The council authorized a traffic study to be done to change some of the zoning there. And from my research on the previous, this has been an issue in Plymouth before, and on the previous housing element, it was the same thing. And it was kind of like people volunteered, hey, you can rezone my property. And I think that was done. And then it was unrezoned because it was kind of just a quick fix to try to get the housing element through and reviewed and approved by HCD, but it wasn't really a sustainable or well thought out approach. And that is based purely on my research of reading minutes, going through resolutions, and trying to get an understanding and a background sense. Like previously it's been said, there's been so much staff turnover that it couldn't hear it from anyone specifically.
I want to go back to Stephanie because I may have cut you off and not given you the opportunity to finish. Did you have more questions, comments?
Yeah, I'm still, this answer that it's too late to make any changes is very disturbing. I'm sure HCD would be very concerned about that as well, since they make a big deal about you have to have community input in this plan. If the consultant is telling us that it's too late to make changes to this draft plan, the only time it's too late is if it's already been submitted to the state. So has it been submitted to the state?
No, so you're misunderstanding what I'm saying, Stephanie. What they said, they were getting the draft ready. There has been many opportunities for public input. It has been put, the planning commission has been aware of them. I had let you all know many times, every time that there was a meeting. It's been on our website. It's been on the county's website. So there has been opportunities for public input. They were ready to publish the draft housing element, and that's what it was. It's not too late. That's what the public comment period is for, to take these comments and incorporated the changes to them.
So I'm asking, and first of all, I think we've only had one meeting in 2022. So saying that you announced it at every meeting is really overstating. There wasn't any public notice given to the residents in Plymouth by the city of Plymouth. And so I don't think that there was many opportunities for people. So we'll just have to agree to disagree on that. But I would like to see these two sites taken out of this document, and to have instead put in there, I'm sorry, I see your lips moving, but I can't hear you. Are you talking to me?
What I was saying was that it was presented at the city council also, and I know that there's been more regular city council meetings. I know the previous mayor wanted updates on it, and Kathleen did provide updates, and information has been on the website consistently probably for the last 12 months.
Okay. Again, we'll have to disagree on whether or not there's been sufficient public notice, but my question is, can we take these two opportunity sites out and instead put in here that the housing quotas that are needed will be satisfied by the pending project application that's being considered by the city of Plymouth? I'm asking that, I guess, of the city council, if they would be interested in making that change.
Can I have an additional comment to that? If we had I don't know where this Empire building group is or whatever, but if they had an interest in doing that, why wouldn't you suffice it through that mechanism? You already had an interest, and that was a development team or persons that wanted to pursue that. Why would you put the burden on another parcel that we know is coming through for a different purpose? So that I just, I think we need to not just say we're gonna put it on, let's have a discussion on which is the best parcel according to what we know of what's happening in the city and what's been previously requested.
Have a comment in the audience?
Well, public comment is closed for right now, but I do, being we've had such a discussion, I do plan on reopening it. So if you guys can just hold off, please.
I would be interested in, to go to Bill's point, I would be interested in whether the owners of the Empire Properties Incorporated were still interested in the rezoning of their, two of their parcels. And that would be an important step and be cooperating with the property owner and long-term family residents and the city. So I think that is the important
I
step.
agree.
Just for a moment, I represent Plymouth Empire Properties, I'm president of the corporation, and I can give you almost a response.
I don't
There's no-
Okay.
If he's gonna speak, we should have.
I can wait till later to. I
Okay,
just want to
yeah,
make sure.
Yeah,
Hi,
thank you.
David.
Mayor, may I?
And it does seem like what we talked about earlier is that the two properties that have been identified, the property owners were not consulted. If I understood that correctly. So it seems like before we were to say, well, we're gonna designate another property instead, it seems like we would want to be consistent and consult with that property owner too, also.
Can we, for the purposes of the housing element, to take basically a combination of what Dave and Stephanie said, and that, that our inventory, our obligations, our legal obligations will be met through, a combination or of, new development or rezoning existing parcels within the city to achieve the densities needed to get our low income and very low income housing inventories where they need to be, and take specific parcels out of it. I think putting specific parcels in without having conversations is, well, problematic for all the reasons that we've talked about. But this is also, part of a general plan that's identifying what we need to do and why we need to do it, but how we get it done, can change as we go through and negotiate with developers, as we negotiate with existing parcel owners that are currently vacant. And so, I guess I'd defer to, Aaron, and ask if it's possible just to leave it as generic and identify, take the parcels out of it specifically and say that we will achieve this goal through a combination of new development and rezoning existing parcels within the city limit.
So I wish it was that easy, but when a city cannot show that they can accommodate their arena numbers, they do require you to rezone to show that you can accommodate. So, even if the two parcels that are identified here, the city chooses to rezone those over the next 8 years, they never get developed because the property owner doesn't want to develop them that way, or they're for sale, they never get purchased and developed that way. And another property in the city gets redeveloped to provide affordable housing or lower income housing, then we could count those units, and then those other ones can continue to stay blank. The interesting thing about the housing element is it sets out this plan, but the city is not the driving force or factor in the actual construction of any of these units. Cities don't build houses typically. A city like Plymouth wouldn't. We don't have, like affordable housing agency or anything to do that. So it's all market driven, and that's kind of what can be a frustrating thing about a housing element. They want you to do X, Y, and Z, yet the city's not really we're not in control of the market. And so you can't force things to happen. You can reduce barriers and make it easier for development to happen, but you can't actually make the development happen, if that makes sense.
Mike, did you have more to say on that?
I Yeah, I think it's just an interesting position we find ourselves in. If we have to specifically call out a parcel, we're now putting ourselves in a horrible position of liability of putting a parcel name out there without actively engaging and negotiating with property owners. I don't know how we would get that done in a time frame. I mean, short of saying that this is our commitment and this is what we're doing, and we have a development project in the works, and we're going to look at other parcels and negotiate with landowners to be able to achieve this within the 8-year period. If we have to put a parcel name down, a number down there without having negotiated with anybody, I'd expect Frank to get a call next week from somebody's attorney.
Mike, I think that what Aaron was explaining, and Aaron can correct me, that the housing element and the maps involved in the housing element are a plan. And it's not necessarily a rezoning of those parcels because it's named that on the plan and on the map. You're identifying it as potentially being rezoned during the life cycle of the housing element, the 8 years. Is that correct, Aaron?
Yes, I mean, this draft housing element does in one of the programs specifically calls out the city of Plymouth saying it's one of the first ones, that the city will rezone to accommodate its RENA. And like we said, it could be somewhere else. It can easily be somewhere else than those sites. We could have someone come to us in the next 6 months and say, I just bought this piece of property. I want to upzone it to a higher density. And then the problem is solved. We don't need to do that specific, the specific properties that we've called out in the housing element. We would revise the housing element then to meet to show where it would be otherwise.
And Mike Sullivan here, I think I have a comment on Mike McLaughlin's comment. Putting something like that in a document like this, identifying somebody's property, could change the equation of a sale or the value of that property for that property owner. And that's more what I would be concerned with rather than what the city has to do. If we're calling it out as saying, this is potential for development, that could give somebody who's either buying or wanting to sell that property to put them at an advantage or a disadvantage. So I really don't like identifying properties in here unless the property owner has agreed to in a public document like this. I think that sets us up to some liability.
In a perfect world.
Correct.
But it sounds like we don't have time to redesignate property right now. We have to go,
No, all we have to do is identify,
Yes, I said.
not rezone.
And program 3, if you go in the housing element, program 3, which is on page 5 of the housing plan. So adequate sites, all jurisdictions shall make sure that there's adequate sites for their arena numbers. And then Plymouth is specifically called out saying Plymouth to rezone at least 2 acres of vacant land from sites identified in the annex to accommodate the 6th cycle and carryover 5th and 4th cycles of very low and low income RENA, 40 units total.
So we do have to rezone then?
Yes, in this next 8-year housing cycle, we need to rezone to properties that would accommodate 40 units. So, I mean, you could do 1 acre at 40 units per acre, something like that. That's probably not appropriate for the city because of the rural character, but yeah.
You're saying not necessarily those two
And
parcels.
the state is not going to let you take that out of these proposed programs. So that's.
Stephanie, you have your hand up?
Yes, I just want to reiterate that I support what Mike McLaughlin and
Mike Sullivan?
Mike Sullivan, that was the other person, sorry, said about the impact to these property owners. It could impact sales. People can look this up. It could impact their ability to sell or not sell their property. They might feel maybe the county's going to force a zoning, and potential seller might walk away when they do their due diligence. I just really am opposed to doing this and saying it's too late to change it when it's been stressed to me that there's been plenty of time for public input over this process. Why weren't these property owners contacted earlier, I guess is the question. So it's a failure on the part of the city that it's happening so late. I'm looking at one of these parcels. Is it, this map's hard for me to really see, but is it the property at the corner of the roundabout is one of the properties that you're saying for rezoning?
On Main Street.
That's how I see it on the map.
So you're saying that that piece of property that's right at the roundabout corner would be suitable for 40 housing units?
Not really.
No, that's not what it's saying. It's saying that it would be rezoned. I believe it's 15 dwelling units per acre is the minimum zoning for the sites that to accommodate what would be considered low. And if
So it'd be about 25 units that you saying that would be have to be put on that site at the roundabout. I don't even know how that's physically possible, given Caltrans requirements and everything else, emergency access and everything else that would have to happen there. I don't even think that's physically possible. It feels like we're just picking things to come into compliance. Is there a possibility? I still think that saying we're going to accomplish it through the Greelage Ranch, since it's required to provide it, is the most reasonable solution. But if the council's unwilling to do that, what about picking some city-owned property and saying we're going to rezone that? We have a lot across from City Hall that's used for pop-ups right now. Why don't you say you're going to put the density there, and then you're not impacting anyone else other than the city. And you're saying it can change later, so the city can make a change later when they are able to better identify properties.
And just to add, sorry, this is Bill, just with that, nobody's saying that we haven't decided on what we can or can't do. We're just saying our purpose is to say, do we agree with the two parcels? And it sounds like we may not. And are there 2 acres somewhere else in the city that we can identify? And it sounds like we have to rezone it to meet this requirement. It could be, Stephanie, to your point, it could be part of the Graylick property. It could be part of the other property we were talking, it could be a city property. I'm just saying those are our alternatives. We need to get to that discussion.
And Aaron, I have a question too. They're listed in the PowerPoint. I don't remember how they are in the actual housing element. I don't have it in front of me, but as opportunity sites, right? So are we tied to those, or could we just list every single vacant property in Plymouth on here so we're not singling people out? Is that a possibility or an alternative?
So if you look in the housing element, there's the pull-out sheet, the larger one, that's the inventory in the Plymouth Annex. It's the inventory of sites. It's all the vacant sites within the city. So a lot of them are ones in Zinfandel that are vacant, but you know, there's plans there. And then there's other vacant sites within the city, the Greelage one, and it lists all the vacant sites. And those were just the 2 that were selected. If we go to the state saying, look, we have all these vacant sites, give us some time to figure out which ones, I think that they will make you go back and select sites. That has been my experience previously in housing elements, couple cycles ago, and the state has only gotten more and more stringent about this and really wants to have cities actually select things instead of saying, don't worry, we'll do it, because it doesn't happen.
Okay.
So we have people here in City Hall who have been waiting very patiently. So I'd like to, if it's okay, I'd like to open this up to public comment again. And then once we do that public comment and hear from everybody, if the council and planning commission feels like we need to continue our discussion, we can do that. So I'm going to open this to public comment now. And I think you've been waiting patiently. Push the thing.
Turns red.
There you go.
David Abbott, representing the Plymouth Empire Properties. The
The first thing that I'd like to see is I'd like the letter that was sent in on behalf of Plymouth Empire to be distributed, because obviously it hasn't reached all of the planning commissioners or the council. And it's very important that they read it and are able to understand the parameters of what we put before you. Second thing is I have a question. I've heard the phrase 2 parcels tonight quite a bit. Are we talking about the red hash parcels that are north and south of town? Okay. To recap, the former president and myself came to a meeting of the city council, and there were a number of sites. I think Hawksview, people had been designated, but then they wanted to back out. I hope I have that right. They didn't want it. I think there was someone to the west that had been designated, but they too weren't satisfied if they wanted to become high density. And at the time, there wasn't an answer. Hence, we appeared before the council to say we had parcels or areas within our property, which by the way is 89 acres to the east of 49. And we've been waiting patiently for 2.5 years, almost 3 years, to find out based on the traffic study, because that was the nexus for the traffic study. And it's not just high density, it was industrial down by Foothill. And so the traffic study would be the guidelines of whether it qualified, didn't qualify, whether it was just right, all of the components. I don't think you have to, as this gentleman, I think his name is Michael, but I'm not sure, said that,
Yeah, it's Michael.
what was your name?
Bill.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bill. Too many mics in the mix. Mentioned that we don't want to lock ourselves into, but I'm inclined to agree easily with Valerie that you're just designating an area. Well, the council designated our 2 parcels that they, as a group, and it wasn't a motion, but it was the sense of the board or the council that they liked that since the other 2 vacated their desires. And we were offering something that satisfied that component for the housing element. And it hasn't moved anywhere. So I think the easiest thing at this juncture, since you have a short time, is to redesignate them or to do something within the scope and body of this housing element to say, these are the 2 that make the most sense. They've been in line the longest. And you don't have to be forced into a corner for a last minute decision. They've been here all this time. And since it's been expressed that the other 2 parcels are not willing and you're up against the brick, you remove the wall and you don't have to worry about it, or you turn around and go back where you came and you have your answers already in place. One additional comment that I had, based on the comments that I've heard tonight from both bodies, there's not a lot of answers that you can readily go to a document, any document, and get your answers. The fact that you're up against the wall tonight to find out answers for things that are common sense and are crucial for you to make a decision haven't been presented. The definitions of the housing, I was thrown for a loop on a low, very low density. I never heard the term or saw the term high density at all in there. Now, maybe one isn't all encompassing, the others in subsections, but it's not clear. And I think the last thing that I have a comment on is it's incumbent upon these bodies and the city to identify these properties or these areas. For instance, the high density was behind the commercial center here just south of the substation. It's on the backside, and the reasoning behind that the council and we both expressed was the high density is right here for downtown nexus, walking distance. Industrial and high density is down by the market. You get the best of both worlds. You increase your industrial commercial component, which needs to be increased, and you also satisfy a high density, low income housing I don't mean that as derogatory, merely as a qualifier, that those units that were woefully lacking and the state is putting on us as a requirement are easily satisfied with willing applicants. And that solves a multitude of problems. But you're up against the clock here on this. And as I understood your presentation tonight, Mayor? City Manager, I apologize. This is my first time in 2.5 years to see anybody in City Hall. They try to catch my point. Oh, shoot. I apologize. I'll have to let it come back up and maybe I can stand one more time. Anyways, that's a broad thumbnail sketch of where we were. We haven't changed our attitude in that 2.5 year time. And definitely these two bodies need to review the traffic study. We don't even know if it qualifies. It may easily qualify. And so without that traffic study, that's a key component to answer a lot of questions. So there's a whole bunch of information that's missing that would help you to make a decision. But the quick, easy out on this is to designate 2 areas which you're not locked into. Suppose somebody in a year from now says, oh man, we've got the best solution you can have, and it's better than the ones that are on the books. And they lobby for it, the city sees the sense, or they don't see the sense. You have at least the time without the pressure to identify which way the city wants to go. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Hill, I know some of you. First, I just want to say I'm really encouraged by a lot of the pragmatic questions and solutions that I've heard out of staff, council, and the commission as well. So I want to preface that. And I'm troubled a little bit because how I came here tonight, how Phil and I came to this, hours before this meeting, it was suggested that I come down because perhaps this meeting has something to do with one of my properties, one of my investment properties. And I looked at the map, I said, okay, that's cool. I don't recognize 9621 as my property because I paid the property tax via, there's no buildings on it. So I'm that guy that owns the property below the brewery, right? I'm that guy. And so I'm sitting back and I said, holy smokes, I looked it up on my land view. I said, that's our property code. And the reality is that I pay those property taxes on a APN number. I don't recognize it as address. Now I know why this dear friend of ours called said, you might want to be president. That's a good idea. Because I would object for that property being rezoned and being forced, but any kind of density housing on it. A, I don't think it's a smart decision. B, I don't think it's what's best for the city and this community. It's a prime piece of property, and someday something really cool should go there that benefits the community. And I don't think it's 20 or 25 units. So I want to go on record saying I object to that. And I'm delighted to hear that a lot of you feel the same way. And Stephanie really is the one, she was chiming in, saying, have those property owners been talked to? And I said, and I'm thinking, yeah, who are those property owners? Some of them, the property owner was 9621, it was me. And I didn't know it because I recognize that property as an APN. So I'm remiss on that, but nonetheless, I'm on record saying that, and I think you guys should move along just fine.
That's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Jim Wise, and I'm probably not able to be as eloquent or as passionate because these gentlemen have much more at stake here, but a couple of observations, if I may. Really want to maybe associate myself with the comments of this gentleman. I think he offers up a short-term solution to get us out of the pickle for properties that are already out there in the public sphere that may be problematic without compromising the marketability of anybody out there that may have property that may want to market it, but we don't put a hurt on those folks. So I think this is a pretty good short-term solution, if I may. I think Councilwoman Kleinfelder has a terrific idea about private-public partnerships that allow us to move forward in a thoughtful way to do some type of housing and those similar type of joint public-private partnerships could be extended past residential and indeed move on to some development on Main Street, because there's clearly a symbiotic relationship between economic development and the residential capability. Sales tax from that type of economic development and retail on Main Street provide the city with operating revenues that we are sorely lacking right now that we could then use as a component of the public sector of our revenue for that type of venture. And I would also offer as an observation that you've got some very vested interests up Shenandoah Valley that have a real need for not only housing that we can help with, but also the economic development that brings all our tourists here for more than just 1 or 2 days a week, but provides something on Main Street that keeps them there and more revenue for the city. With respect to just a couple of other quick observations on the RV park that Councilman Sims raises, there is the houses that are in the 49 RV park are technically considered mobile homes. The park itself is designated as an RV park, not a mobile home. And actually we're somewhat in violation of state statute because there was a limitation of only 150 days per year for an entity to be able to stay in the mobile home park. So we've got some problems if we want to think part of the solution is to do more permanent housing that we can do in violations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John Colburn, hello.
Well, I'm about 145 feet, within 145 feet of being off the net, guys. Very first condemnation of my property. I think that's almost what's happening here. Is because you zone these things, from, they're now highway commercial, which is zone, to a high density, low income housing project that I could not, there's no way I could build a house on there and sell them for enough money to cover the cost. Without some government subsidy or something. So you really impacted my property substantially, and I think you need to talk to me if you're going to do that too. I think it's important to have a conversation with the property.
Thank you, John.
Mayor, is public comment still open?
Public comment is still open. Anybody else here? Anybody on Zoom that would like to speak during public comment?
Is it permissible for me to make a motion at this point?
Well, let me close public comment. So
Okay.
public comment is closed. Any other council or planning commission discussion? Stephanie has her hand up.
Thank you. And again, I apologize because I can't hear everything really clearly at the mic, but the gentleman that spoke that said that he would be willing to have their properties zoned at this rezone for this higher density or designated. Is that, are those properties listed on the Plymouth Annex Attachment Vacant Parcel List? That would be my question. And then secondly, I would just say that I again support removing the 2 parcels that are listed as opportunity sites and picking other, if we have to designate sites, we have somebody that's willing to take that property and put it in there. I think that's the best compromise solution in the short term. Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just for those of you on Zoom, if you don't already know, which is boring here right now, it's a little hard to hear you guys. We'll do our best. Any other comments from the planning commission or city council?
I would like to make a motion. Awesome. And I don't know if this is a sufficient motion without parcel numbers and whatnot, but I would like to make a motion that we direct the planning director to direct the consultant to substitute Mr. Hill's properties, Mr. sorry, David, what was your last name, Edit? Plymouth Emirates Properties previously included properties in the previous iteration of this and substitute those for Mr. Hill's properties that are currently listed. Is that clear?
Okay, so a motion has been made. Do we have a second on that motion?
Could we just clarify the wording before we?
Yep.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And can I clarify, is it like the properties that were in the traffic study in 2019?
I'm sorry, say that again, Erin.
The properties that were in the traffic study, identified in the traffic study in 2019, and I'm looking at the traffic study and it looks like it is 4 acres. I cannot find the addresses. But off of,
Do we have an APN number referenced in Ms. Everson's email?
and that's, I'm trying to see. These are intersections.
We can have some APN numbers in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can look through this more. I'm just like skimming through it right now. The traffic study to identify those properties, which is one off of Bush, I think. And one behind the PG&E station.
Madam Mayor, wouldn't those properties be listed on the vacant property list? So the APNs would be there. Maybe the property owner could identify them if you have that in the packet.
I don't think there were APN numbers in the packet.
They are in the annex. So you don't have a copy of the housing element there?
Not the entire housing element, just a copy of the PowerPoint.
There's an annex in the Plymouth annex. There's an attachment that lists all the vacant properties in town. And so I'm thinking that these properties would be on that list. Thank you.
Did Mike's motion get a second?
No, Bill asked for clarification on the motion. Do you want to clarify?
I don't know how much more we can clarify without addresses, APN numbers, but I guess to clarify, make a motion that we direct the planning director to direct the consultant to substitute the APN numbers identified in the prior traffic study and suggestion for the prior housing element, substitute those for Mr. Hill's 2 properties that are listed within the housing element currently.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion which has been seconded. Could we take a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember White.
Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelder.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zip.
Aye.
Mayor Hackerworth.
Aye.
Commissioner Moreno.
Aye.
Vice Chair Silver.
Aye.
Chair Silver.
Aye.
Motion passes.
We have a Councilmember Kleinfelder has a comment.
I have been pretty patient about this throughout the process and asked a lot of questions over the last year about this process. And I feel strongly that this is a counting housing element with Plymouth's name on it. And it is not designed for the city of Plymouth, but we're being told there's nothing we can do about it now, so we're gonna be married to this for 8 years.
So on that note, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
You're so-